Great, and we're live. Welcome everybody to this Hangout on Air. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies that are working remotely and doing great things remotely together. And today I'm excited because I'm joined by Mark Kilby, and it says, Mark, that you're an Agile software mentor. You're also the founder of Agile Lean Coffee Orlando, and an author of a number of publications. I was looking on LinkedIn, and there's so many I can't even list them in the introduction. So Mark, welcome. I'm excited to talk to you. Why don't you give us a little bit of information about who you are?
Thank you, Lizette. I'm thrilled to be here. A little bit of background on me. Over 20 years in software, most of that time dealing with distributed teams, and in the last, I would say, 11 years, serving in a role of either Agile coach or Agile mentor. So as an Agile coach, you're typically working with teams, showing them better ways to develop software, work together, collaborate. And so there's any number of things you end up doing. There's training, there's facilitation, there's sitting side by side and showing them how to do some of these new processes that Agile requires of you. So what's really unique about that is it's really a lot of face-to-face. But as I said, a lot of my past work over the 10 years or so has been mostly with distributed teams, and that's why I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about that.
Yeah, and before we go into the distributed teams part, I'd like you to describe a bit for people what exactly is Agile. I mean, it's very well known in the software world, and it's just starting to branch out into the other fields.
Yes. So the Agile movement started in the early to mid 1990s. And became popular in 2001 with something called the Agile Manifesto. So, folks can go to agilemanifesto.org and read about that. But essentially, what Agile is, it is a way of collaboratively working with the business to develop the right product at the right time. So rather than your business stakeholders writing out, here's all the requirements that I have, see you in 6 months to a year, it's really working with them on a weekly, sometimes daily basis to develop a piece of the solution, have them take a look at it, see if they're on the right track, and just continually work with the business to make sure you're building the right thing that's really going to be useful. So, think of the number of times you've, opened up a certain software package and maybe you've gone through the menus and go, what is all this other stuff in here? And so that is the stuff that the Agile teams would not develop. They would only focus on those items that would be truly useful to the end users.
So the minimum viable product as soon as possible, and then you add.
I was trying to stay away from the buzzwords. So.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and I don't even know the buzzwords because it's not my field.
That's okay.
Good that I got one.
Yeah, you did. You have one.
Okay, great. And tell me then about the distributed teams that you're working with. What does that look like? Do you work distributed also?
Right. So my current company, Sonatype, we develop a suite of products for managing open source software components. So we can pull down and manage different software components, and we can also tell you what security issues you might have if you don't have the latest version. We can also tell you what kind of licensing issues, because there's all kinds of different software licenses that could get you into trouble if you don't realize that certain licenses might say, if you use this, you might have to make all of your source code available. That's sort of for some companies that could be a problem. So it's helping understand what are all these different pieces you're pulling together. So it's a lot like the car manufacturers who track all their different components, and if something goes wrong, they can do a recall. They can tell you exactly what components were in there, what issues there might be, and so it helps you track that, as we like to say, bill of materials within your software. So that team is really distributed worldwide. We all work out of our houses. We're a completely distributed company.
Okay.
So and I will say this is the first time I've been in a pure virtual organization, but my past history has been in many different distributed teams. I used to be a coach for Rally Software, which was a SaaS tool for managing Agile projects, and many times we'd have pockets of people in different locations using the tool. We'd have to train them on how to use the tool as well as the different Agile techniques. And so over the years, I started developing a few different techniques to help these people really be collaborative, even though they weren't face to face.
Okay, so you started really specializing in the distributed part of working together with
Out
teams.
of necessity, yeah. So
Right, so you're thrown into the situation. And do you have a way, do you have something that you do at the beginning of a project with each virtual team, like some sort of team agreement that you make, or, we're going to communicate like this, or do you let the teams more self-organize? Is there something that you do in the beginning to tune your team, really, is what I'm
well,
asking?
usually I'm coming on site as helping an existing team. Sometimes it would be starting up a new team. So if it's starting up a new team, there's some great resources out there already to do that. So there's the book Liftoff by Diana Larson and Esther Derby. And while it's geared towards software teams, it really could be for any kind of team. And so in that book, they talk about how do you identify what are the key agreements, why is the team together, uh, what sort of resources do they have available to them that they can pull in, and what are some other groups they need to communicate with. So it's kind of setting all that context for the team up front. So, but
Indeed,
many teams have that set up when I come on board. So
okay, so yeah, and I can see how it would be useful for any team, whether you're virtual or not, that you would have these sort of agreements in place. But I think it seems to become critical when you're on a virtual team to have
yeah,
those kind of things in place.
yeah. So what I'll typically do is if they have some of those agreements in place, or maybe they're not working well, we'll talk about some things they can add on to it. So, for instance, with virtual teams, I always make sure they have multiple communication channels. So, if they have video, they have audio, but maybe also chat, because if your video and audio go down, how are you going to know to coordinate and get back together? So for our teams, we have a screen share, we have audio, sometimes video, and chat going, which can be a lot to handle. But think about when you're in a room full of people and you're facilitating, you're managing those multiple channels as well. So it's just a different type of management, and it takes some getting used to. But it's really managing that same number of channels you would face to face.
Right, it's just a different, it's all in a different form. I like that you used the analogy that it's the same as facilitating a meeting in person.
Right,
It's just you have sort of different things to deal with.
right, right.
And you hit on something kind of interesting, this virtual management. I'm reading a lot more about virtual management and virtual leadership.
Mhm.
What is the difference, do you think, for you? How does one manage a team different virtually rather than in person?
Yeah. So for that one, it's at least with software teams, but I think it's true for any virtual team. You've got to be tech savvy enough that you can use the different technologies and maybe even have your plan B for when those technologies fail, so you can still stay in touch with the team, still keep communicating with them, whether it's in a meeting or just some ad hoc conversations. The other part of it is I think it's even more critical that you really get to know the team members, that you really get to understand what's important to them, why they're there, and do they understand the purpose of the team. So I actually talked a little bit about this at the Agile 2014 conference. It's what's in it for them to be part of it, or I talk about what's in it for you, what's in it for the team, and then the third part is, do they understand what's in it for others for this team to exist? Do they really understand what's the big goal? And I think as a virtual manager, you've got to work pretty darn hard to do that, as opposed to being in an office and you can have those casual conversations with folks to just check in with them on that.
So there's this need for not over communication, but lots of different kinds of communication, perhaps.
Yes, yes. But
Yeah.
yeah, over communication probably not a bad idea. Actually, with our teams right now, we talk about that all the time. It's okay to over communicate. It's okay to repeat something in a daily Scrum call that's in email. Matter of fact, it's even encouraged, just to make sure everyone's aware of something that's come up that maybe the team needs to be aware of.
And how do you communicate with your virtual team? What tools do you guys use? Or is it different based on the project or?
No, right now we all tend to use the Atlassian suite. So we have Jira Agile, we have HipChat, and in HipChat you can have multiple rooms, and we take advantage of that. So each team has a room. Our user experience folks have a room. Some of our salespeople, our customer support people have a room, and we bounce around between the rooms. So anyone in the company might be in multiple rooms at one time. We also have what we like to call our lounge. So the lounge is where people can bring up anything. So yesterday was a conversation on somebody's latest crop of hot peppers they grew. And so things like that happen in lounge, and that's sort of our team building area. So it's open season, whatever, within reason. People can bring up in the lounge and share things.
Okay, so then you encourage people to sort of hang out casually, which is, of course, an important part. Something that's missing from virtual teams is that, the water
Right.
cooler time.
Yeah, so that's the hangout area. So along with that, we have Google Apps as well for collaborative document creation, and also GitHub. So what's interesting about those different tools is, and it took me a while to get used to this, I can watch the thread of conversation kind of go through the different tools and then pop up in the phone on a phone conversation and then back through the tools again. But you'll still see that thread of conversation.
And it sounds like things are pretty transparent in your company, that people are going back and forth between chat rooms, that maybe everybody can see the marketing chat if they wanted to, or some of the other rooms if they wanted to. So are there any issues with that? Or to me, of course, it seems like it would be better, but I'm just curious if that's brought anything up of just too much transparency, things people shouldn't know.
Well, not everything's in the chat rooms, but I'll say the majority of things. Just about, actually all the engineering team has that kind of transparency, and that's critical for an agile organization. Is really to have that transparency and let folks know, the good with the bad. So that way, as an organization, we can look at, okay, what do we need to do about this? Is it just this team? Does it impact outside the team, and do we need to respond to it quickly? And
Mhm.
so that kind of transparency is very helpful. And if you haven't come from that kind of organization, it can be a bit uncomfortable. But with an agile team, we're used to that. We're comfortable sharing the good with the bad in those different channels.
Interesting. So it's just a matter of getting used to it, maybe for some people, just making the switch into a different team.
Right.
So then I should ask, it sounds like that's working well, this sharing information, talking with each other. What else works really well on your virtual team? I mean, is there a particular, you say your team members are doing it because this is how it's set up, so they're distributed by default, but
They're distributed by, yeah. So it was interesting with most of the agile gurus out there. They'll say, teams need to be co-located, and I agree. A co-located team is much more effective. But I think what's unique about the teams I have now is they've got that background in open source software development, so they're used to being online. They're used to having those conversations, even debates, in those online forums in multiple ways. So I'll kind of keep tabs on the conversations, and if I see a debate going on, I'll encourage them. Hey, you might want to get on the phone. You might want to have a higher bandwidth connection to resolve this rather than go back and forth multiple times in an electronic forum. So. But I think because of that open source background, they're very comfortable moving from that synchronous to kind of asynchronous, online to live conversations.
right, so the communication is rather smooth because of, I've heard this before, that with the open source background, that people are just, this is how they're used to communicating.
Right,
They
right,
have to.
yeah.
And what do you think with the team members? What's in it for the team? I mean, they're working on a project. I assume they're working on a project that they really enjoy, that this is not just a job for most people.
Right, yeah, they really enjoy the work. For us, I think for many of us, it's being able to make a difference in some of the not so pleasant things of online life. I mean, there's all kinds of security threats, hackers, and part of our work is to really defend against that. I mean, that's primarily one of our tools does is to help prevent some of those issues. So as an example, a lot of our customers knew about Heartbleed before Heartbleed was public. I'll put it that way.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's important. But another key element is what I like to call it's not work-life balance, but more work-life blend. So because we work out of our houses, people are comfortable having things in the background happen there. So that nobody's upset if somebody's kid pops up in the background and says hi, or a family member walks past, because we know the context of where we're working. But also we're everyone on the team is very good about checking in and checking out. So you'll see messages throughout the day. Hey, I'll be out for 3 hours. I've got to take the car in for maintenance. I'll be back on tonight to make up the time. And nobody worries about checking on it because we'll see activity in GitHub and other systems that you can see they were online, they were working. So.
Right. So then you've gone more to a results-based. You're seeing what the results actually are rather than are they working between 8 and 5.
Right. Yeah. So there's nothing about. So we have some core hours for meetings, but other than that, there could be people that start work at 6 a.m. East Coast time, and you might have work going on until 8 or 9 o'clock West Coast time, just depending on who's up and plugged in and working.
Okay. So it sounds like things go pretty smoothly. What do you struggle with?
Yeah, so all is not rainbows. There are some challenges. So sometimes communications can get a little challenging, especially around topics that we have some very smart people, and sometimes they have some very strong opinions about what technologies to use or what approach to use. Sometimes those debates can get a little more challenging. And we're still working through what's the best way to get through some of those debates. If we had more face-to-face opportunities, I would probably have certain facilitation techniques that I would use. So right now I'm trying to adapt some of those to those situations to help the team through some of that storming, as it were.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's definitely one area. Sometimes with the multiple communications channels, we still find not everyone gets the message at the same time. And so we have that challenge as well. So it's not like walking into the team room and saying, hey, this is important, because that message might go through on a chat channel that kind of drifts away. It might go through an email, and not everybody checks their email the same way. So that's where we have to over-communicate some messages just to make sure that everyone on the team got it.
And do you have personality issues in that sense? Oh, I'm starting to get an echo again. Are you hearing me?
No, I am not.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I'm going to unplug the microphone. Yes, 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, how about I'm still doing it. Let's a bit better. Okay. Want to make sure the sound.
Okay. Yep, I can pop on a headset if you need it.
Okay. This one's good. I'm curious about personality issues. So when on a virtual team, it's important when we like each other, because when we like each other, we like to talk to each other some more and try to resolve. And I know that on a virtual team, if you don't like somebody very much, it's easy to hide.
Mm-hmm.
So
and you're breaking up a little bit. I'll just let you know.
Sorry?
You're breaking up just a little bit for me.
Oh boy. Okay.
All right. Let's switch to headsets.
Well, this brings up a good point of having backup technology needed.
Absolutely. Let's see. Yeah, so as part of that online life, you always have to have a backup system.
Yeah, case in point, actually. And before the call, you told me about a facilitation technique you use for your virtual meeting or your virtual attendee, which is having a remote buddy.
Yeah.
So not only having software, but also having a remote buddy. I love it.
Right, yeah. So I refer to it as the buddy system because most people are familiar with that, whether you've been in scouts or elementary school, there's always that introduction of a buddy system. And so we do the same thing for mixed facilitation meetings. So if I'm with a group of people co-located and we have some remote folks, I'll ask members of the team there in the room who can be a buddy to one of the remote people so that they have somebody directly they can reach out to. So that kind of takes some of the load off the facilitator, and at the same time, there's always two people looking out for that remote person, the overall facilitator and their buddy. So as part of that, I ask the buddy to make sure they have a direct chat channel to that person so that if anything happens, the remote person can send them a note and say, hey, I can't break into the audio channel, or the call dropped, I'll be right back on, or I've got a question, can you ask it for me?
Okay, that makes sense. I really like that tip, actually. So we've talked a bit about the benefits for your team, and we've talked a bit about the challenges and some of the tools. How about, I'd like to go more into the personality aspect and also the productivity aspect of it. So let's talk about productivity. And you said that you have ways of knowing whether people are working because they're checking in code, or it sounds like we're having more sound issues. Is that true?
No, just my headset's not working. So
okay.
If we're still having issues, I can switch to earbuds. I have yet to.
So productivity. How do you know people are working? So you're saying they're checking in code, but is it all code based, or are there other things that you use as well?
So there's code, there's documentation. The automated tests are also coding. So there's not so much writing of test plans as there is test code. But with the different requirements and what we call in Agile user stories, it's usually multiple team members working together, usually 2 or 3 people working on a story. And so those 2 or 3 people know when one's falling behind and might need some help. So the team is really good about checking in with each other in those situations. So if somebody's kind of stuck on a task for a while, in our daily stand-up calls, somebody will ask, hey, is there something you need? Do you need somebody else to jump in and help you? So we always get a sense day to day, is everyone moving forward? Because we're working in even smaller sub-teams to get those stories done.
It seems to me that Agile, I know a lot of people say that Agile and virtual working can't really work together, but to me it seems to me that Agile is the primary model for how virtual work should be done. I mean, this task-based, short sprint cycles, checking in often, over-communicating, really having well-defined work, doing retrospectives and lessons learned. I mean, it all just sounds like virtual teams have to work Agile or it wouldn't work.
Well, yes and no. So in 2001, when the Agile Manifesto came out, the technology wasn't quite there yet. I mean, now, with high-speed network connections and it's easy to pull up video, whether it's Skype or Google Hangout, I think it's a lot easier for distributed teams to collaborate now. And the important part is a lot of the same techniques for collaboration, I believe, translate into the virtual. So the principles are the same, it's just some of the techniques might need to be a little bit different. So those are some things I've been kind of collecting. I'm going to start blogging on that soon, both on the Sonatype blog site, my own blog site, just to start sharing things like the buddy system. So the buddy system is completely technology independent. It's just saying, hey, can you help out? Can you make sure this person is with us in the meeting? Is really all we're doing.
Do you have some other nuggets that stand out?
Yeah, there's quite a few. So I'm looking up on my bookshelf here. I think it's further up, so I'm not going to reach way up and get that. But the book Agile Retrospectives by Dan Larson and Esther Derby, that book has several activities that, in a sense, require face-to-face interaction. But as I started looking at the exercises, I started coming up with ways for distributed teams to use these techniques. So I think I shared with you before some of that wiki page where we had captured how to do this distributed retrospectives. And we actually, a few Agile coaches got together at the Agile 2014 conference we shared some notes on what are some different things people had tried. And actually, many of those exercises out of that book can be done in a distributed setting where everyone is collaboratively working through, what did they see over in a 2-week iteration or a longer release cycle. What insights did they get out of that, and what decisions do they want to make as far as what kind of improvements moving forward? Because an Agile team is always looking to improve their process. They're not waiting to the end of the project. They're taking a break essentially every 2 weeks, spending about an hour or two every 2 weeks to look at how's the process working for us, and what do we want to change and make better for us and for our customers.
So what do you think the resistance is to working in this way? I mean, let's start with Agile before we even go to the virtual teams, because it just sounds like this seems so clearly the right way to work. What is their resistance?
So the resistance, I think, primarily was because the technology wasn't there until the last few years. Another is people value the face-to-face connections. So I'm not sure how it is where you're at there in Europe, but here in the U.S., there's been many co-working sites that have popped up. And a lot of that is from remote workers that are really seeking that human connection. For me, it's as you mentioned before, the lean coffee. So getting together every week or so with other people to share ideas and how they're working, or through some of the things we did at Agile Orlando with some of the evening presentations we have there from speakers, or just getting together with other remote workers and say, hey, how are you doing this in an Agile context? So there's still that need for human contact, and I think that's where some of the resistance is too. If you're used to being face to face, there's an adjustment period to being in an all virtual organization. But I'll say I've gotten to know many of my coworkers. I know their interests. I know who plays Mario Kart. I know who grows hot peppers. I know who has kids and who has cats, and so we still have those connections, and we'll joke around. So, for instance, another one of my techniques is we have a pretty efficient daily stand-up on our teams, and they usually run anywhere from 5 to maybe 8 minutes. And that's for one team that's about 5 people, another one that's 8 people. And so we have pretty quick scrums, but I always encourage people to either jump on a little bit early or hang out afterwards. And so the ones that show up early, we socialize a little bit. How's things there? How's the weather? That kind of thing. And afterward, we'll do 2 different things. During the scrum, anyone can say, along with, here's what I'm working on, here's what's next, here's what's blocking me. Another thing they can add is, hey, I have a post-scrum topic, and they might say, I need the whole team, or I need certain people. And so after everyone kind of makes their rounds on what they're working on, we'll stick around for post-scrum, and that person can go through their topic and say, hey, I'm struggling with this issue, who can help out? And so that's the opportunity for the team to live kind of help that person work through whatever issue it is they're dealing with. And we also kind of socialize a little bit then too.
So it sounds like one of the real struggles in teams, and I do hear this a lot, is how do we humanize the virtual experience? Because you're right, in Europe it's exactly the same. There's co-working spaces popping up all over the place. Clearly the need for in contact, being with humans is important, because otherwise people wouldn't go to a coffee shop to get work done. I mean, they're there because they need the people to be around.
Yeah.
So it sounds like then the challenge is humanizing the office, and having these informal conversations is very useful. And I've heard one person actually say that sometimes the virtual experience can be more human because we're seeing so much of somebody's personal life behind them on the screen. We're seeing
my
kids
wife's
running by.
behind me right now. Yeah.
Exactly. So I could probably guess that somebody's a fan of Mickey Mouse, and somebody, and there's a lot of books, and you can infer a lot of information actually.
Yeah. And I think it's important too, and that's why I was talking about that work-life blend. So it's not shutting all that off. It's really letting people see, hey, this is part of my life also, and I think that's important to share in virtual teams. So it's what's letting the socialization kind of working a little bit more, as well as the background also kind of be shown a little bit more.
And has that ever been a problem, this extra personalization? Has that ever come back to bite you or anybody on your team? I just out of curiosity.
So I will say for those who work in a distributed environment, they're they're used to that kind of blending, and it's my experience that most of them actually like that blending because they like to know about their coworkers. They like to know who the person is. It's not that they're just some kind of robot sitting in front of the screen. We really want to know who's at the other end of that line. The ones that maybe are not are basically, well, I don't want to say all business, but just they try to keep that work-life separation. Those ones I find that struggle with the distributed teams or the hybrid distributed teams and are very bothered by all the noise in the background. So that's a problem. Also, I think it's important that the on the life side of the work-life blend, it's letting family members and others know, hey, for certain kind of calls, I do need a little quiet time. But my wife and I have an agreement. If the door is closed, that means the other person really shouldn't come busting in there. With kids, it's a little different. So it's
Right,
yeah.
right. So have you ever had somebody on your team that's just not cut out for the remote working? They just can't do it?
On the current team, no. On past teams, yes. If if they're not used to going to networking events like local user groups or co-working, the isolation can really get to you after time. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them kind of got into a state of depression over it. So I've seen people that just kind of quietly faded away. They'd show up for the calls and then they would just eventually give up. They might quit. They might join another team or something like that. But I find the ones that are willing to share a little bit of the personal side of themselves and get to know, really make an effort to get to know their team members, it helps. And it doesn't mean introverts fail. I am INTJ, so I've got a strong introverted side, but I do enjoy connecting with people on a one-on-one basis, and that's another reason I like virtual.
Right, it's not so overwhelming and completely overstimulating to be
Right.
in interaction with people. And it's also, you can turn it off and you're in your own. I'm also the same. I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm extroverted, but I'm highly sensitive. So the interaction is overstimulating for me sometimes, and I find that working in this virtual setting can really help that in
Yeah.
terms of my personality. So I'm assuming that this must be the case for others as well. And software developers are, stereotypically introverted.
Yes.
So it seems to this lifestyle lends itself stereotypically. There's all kinds of loopholes and personality types in every stereotype. So I'll preface it with that.
I mean, certainly, with many software developers, it requires a lot of deep concentration, and there's times where you've got to be heads down, you got to have your blinders on, maybe your headphones on, your favorite music, and just kind of going away at it, and that's cool. But with those that have been on a natural team, they realize they've got to cut for air, they've got to reconnect, and I'll say that the folks I have right now, they're awesome at that. They're really great about not only coming up for air, but listening for their team members to see when team members might need help.
So the only other, I guess I have two more topics on my list, and to jump in, if there were any questions that I haven't asked you that you would like to have been asked, or something that you're dying to tell. But my last two topics are on building trust between the team members, because I think that's important. That's sort of a baseline, of course, in every virtual team. And the other one is just curious about cultural differences on your team. So those are two pretty different questions, but I'll just put them out there. Maybe we'll start with the trust question. If there's issues in building trust, or what you think, what really works for building trust on a team?
Yeah. So my friend Christopher Avery has a great approach to this. He talks about trusting just right, and it's really about kind of making those small trust deposits to the rest of the team. So on an Agile team, it's about making and making commitments on a daily basis, and that's what part of that stand-up is. So while the team has these user stories they're working on, individual team members are saying, hey, I'm going to take on this task. I think I can get it done tomorrow. There's the commitment. You get to tomorrow, hey, I had some issues, but I think I can get this done, and then making sure you meet that commitment. So it's one, keeping some visibility again on what each other's doing, what commitments they're making to the rest of the team, and also letting the team know, hey, I'm having problems with the commitment here, so I'm going to recommit, or reaching out for help. So I think it's all those elements is key, whether it's a virtual or co-located team. It's just keeping those commitments visible and keeping people informed on here's how I'm helping the rest of the team.
So there's being visible, of course, working out loud with your work, making sure that everybody knows what's going on, and then also being reliable, following through on what you say you're going to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And those two things, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted and I didn't hear the last thing you said.
That's it. It's making those daily deposits into the trust account. Yeah.
I like that analogy, the daily deposit, because it is all the little things. It's not just one thing where you walk into the office one day and everybody trusts you. It's 100 things that came up until that point, until that day. It's the littlest. Did you say what you say? Did you do what you said you were going to do?
Right. Yeah. So, and you can make 100 deposits throughout the week, but if you blow it on something big, then people will start to question again, and you're kind of starting over again and having to redeposit. So.
Right. It can take 6 months to build up and just a day to lose all your hard-earned deposits.
Yeah. So I think of trust is like the stock market, which would be a scary analogy. So.
Right. Run away.
Yeah.
And I don't know, are all of your team members in the U.S.? Are you working across time zones?
All the above. So right now we have we've got three Agile teams, fourth team that's shifting to Agile. On one of the teams, we have team members from Cologne, Germany to Austin, Texas, so that's several time zones there. Another team going from U.S. and Canadian East Coast to the West Coast, and then a third team going from Eastern Europe all the way to the West Coast.
Okay, that's starting to get pretty far there. We're starting to get like 11 hours difference, 10 hours difference.
Right. And then another team is a little more close, is like 2 or 3 time zones. So we try to keep them close together, but due to some of the expertise of some of the team members, one team is spread out quite a bit, but they have some unique skills on one product.
And the time zones, I hear from I haven't heard anybody say yet time zones are no issue for me, so I'm assuming time zones are also an issue for the team. And is it just a matter of dealing with them? Do you have any special tips for that?
Well, that's where that work-life blend comes in. So we do have some core hours that we specify for, hey, these are when we'll typically schedule meetings, and we try to be pretty stringent on that and not schedule outside that time. And then, as I said before, our team members are very good about kind of checking in and out. So, like I said, I'll look on Hip Chat, and the fellow in Germany sometimes he might be in at 6 a.m. East Coast time, and I'll see him work, and then right after one of the scrums, he'll say, "Okay, out for 3 hours." He's off to play volleyball, and then he'll check in as soon as he's back. He says, "Okay, I'm back online," and so having that flexibility and just kind of everyone paying attention to those core hours, the time zone difference really doesn't make that big of a difference. As a matter of fact, with two of our teams, they work on the same product. The team boundaries are actually very flexible, so they'll review each other's work, they'll help each other out. So it's not just the members of this team. So the time zone overlap is even less of an issue because there's others who are familiar with the code, familiar with the work, that can help you out at different times of the day.
So if you get it right, you can really have a 24/7 operation in some sense. I mean, where one
Yeah,
thing
I mean,
ends, where another
we're,
thing kicks off.
yeah, I mean, we're not really trying to do the follow the sun kind of approach that some companies have done. It's just our our culture within our engineering group is very flexible about letting people maintain that work-life blend, and that's one of the reasons why people uh, sign on is because they value that.
Right, and it sounds like you've done it right. I've worked in a company that did something similar. Everybody kept their Skype status accurate, so we didn't use HipChat, but we used Skype. It was a very small company, but everybody knew where each other were at all times. It was simply in the Skype status, and you knew to check there
Yep,
if you needed somebody, and it worked. It
yep,
totally worked.
yep. You knew when to get a hold of them. So, yeah.
So how do you find, so you've got talent all over the world, and how do you find them?
So right now we're a fairly small company. I think engineering, we're probably just over 35, 40 in engineering, somewhere in that range. And so at that size, a lot of our folks have been pulled in through connections, through networking. So people we know, people they've worked with on other open source projects or previous jobs. So there's a lot of that connection. But we're getting to the size now that it's extending beyond that. So in the previous recruiting through networking, there's always been some sort of prior relationship, and so there's always been a pre-established trust. I'll put it that way. And so
Okay.
now we're getting to the point where okay, we're getting new people in that maybe we haven't worked with before, and so as part of that, what we've been doing is making sure more of the team gets to interview the new person and are any red flags. So basically, if there's a couple of thumbs down, then we don't proceed with that candidate. So we use that same collaborative approach in our interviewing process.
It really strikes me as you say that in the beginning, people are bringing in their friends and people that they've worked with before, and I think that must be an incredibly powerful way to build a team.
It is,
I
yeah,
mean, you know these people already, you've worked with them before, you know and like them, you probably know a lot about them, and then if you just bring in your favorite people, and it's
yeah,
got to be magic in some sense, or it can be.
yeah, and you know that they do good work, and so you know great things are going to happen, and it does.
Right, right. So then it starts getting scary, and I'll be curious about your journey now that the company's growing and you're hiring outside of this network. I would be really curious to check in with you and ask about what's been the difference in the team members. And does it matter? I mean, if everybody's interviewing and you're sure about this person, then maybe it goes really well. But once you start hiring outside the network, then what are the differences? That would be a curious thing to explore.
Yeah. Well, and we're doing some slow growth. So we might hire two, three people a quarter at most. So we're not doing any tremendous growth right now. And certainly, we see as a new person gets added onto a team, we go back through that forming, storming, norming process again, and then a team does go back to performing. So I can I can track the team's progress over time in tools like Jira, and you can see this kind of ups and downs of how the team performs. And I can usually tell, I can look at that and say, oh yeah, that was the time everybody was out on summer vacation, or this is when so and so joined and they were trying to help that person kind of get up to speed. And so you can kind of see that in some of the trends of how the team's been working.
Super interesting. I would
Yeah.
love to be able to, I mean, I'm an analytics nut, so I would love to be able to map those trends and just see, like, that you get some idea of what you can expect. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's what I like about Scrum, I think, is that there's a velocity, that
Yep.
there's a realistic velocity beyond what people can do. Because, I mean, I'm thinking I need to do it myself. I look at my task list and I think there is just no possible way that that's all going to happen this week. Yet I still keep it on my task list with the hope that maybe I'll be uber productive
Yeah. That's where you got to take off just the stuff you know you're absolutely going to get done. Yeah.
Right, right. Well, great. I think those are all the questions. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I realize we're going to the top of the hour now, and I know you have other meetings today. But as one last question, I think is if people want to learn more about what you do and know more about who you are, what's the best way to contact you?
So as I mentioned, I'll be blogging more on some of these virtual techniques, especially the facilitation side. So they can go to markkilby.com, markkilby.com, or they can go to Sonatype, and the Sonatype blog will have some posts of more about how we work as an Agile team at Sonatype as well.
Oh, great. So people can get the firsthand stories of what you guys are doing and experimenting with.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, very valuable. I'd love to put that in the liner notes for this interview, for sure. Great. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I learned a number of new things today. I'm really looking forward to writing this up and really digging in. And if I have follow-up questions, I will definitely be sure to contact you.
Absolutely.
So thanks so much. And for everybody listening, thank you again for sitting through on another Hangout on Air with remote interviews. And until next time, be powerful.